Hello, this is Professor James Strickler, and this is a course in American government. This lesson is from Unit 1, about theories of government, is Lesson 6, about the rule of one. In this lesson, you'll learn about the forms that government might take, according to Aristotle. We learn about the positives and negatives of rule of a single person. We learn about Aristotle's definition of monarchy, and about his definition of tyranny, or despotism. In previous lessons, we learned that the problems of living without government would naturally lead us to want a government to provide us with security for our lives, our liberty, and our property. But having decided that we want a government, we must next decide what form of government will be best. We can turn to the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle for guidance as we consider this question. Aristotle is one of the most influential thinkers who ever lived. He was a student of Plato and a teacher of Alexander the Great. He wrote about many subjects, including politics. Aristotle considered the possible forms that a government might take. He decided that we can arrange the possible forms into three general categories. A government might consist of a single person who rules over everyone else. Or a government might be composed of a small number of persons who share power over the people. Or the many people might make up the government themselves. Aristotle then further divided these categories according to the purposes that they might serve. He said that there are two general purposes that rulers might pursue. Some rulers, whether they be one, few, or many, may use their power to try to benefit the entire community over which they rule. Other rulers, whether they be one, few, or many, may use their power to try to benefit themselves. For example, a king might make himself rich, even as his people starve. In this lesson, we will examine the possible outcomes of rule by a single person. In the next lesson, we'll look at rule by a few. And in Lesson 8 of Unit 1, we consider rule of the many. When we think of rule of a single person, we may think of a king or a dictator. Is rule by a single person a good idea or a bad idea? In the United States of America, we have a historical bias against the idea of having a king. So you may not realize that rule by a single person can have some positive features. The conduct of government is greatly simplified, with those who are being ruled always knowing who is in charge, if there's only one ruler. Rather than multiple people pointing fingers at each other when something goes wrong, one person is ultimately responsible. The functions of government are also much more efficient with a single person in charge. Decisions do not need to be debated or voted upon, but can be made instantly. Having one person in charge is a very effective form of government. But rule by a single person can also have some negative features that are potentially very destructive. A single ruler can make decisions that are impulsive, without proper consideration of the relevant facts, and careful deliberation about the possible consequences. This may lead to some very bad decisions. In addition, a single ruler's actions can be arbitrary. They need not be governed by any laws, rules, or even logic. A dictator can make decisions based on whatever crazy whims come to his mind. Thus we can see, unless we are sure our one ruler is both wise and just, rule by a single person is a very dangerous form of government. Whether rule by a single person is more effective than destructive may be a function of the attitude of that person. In other words, it may depend on what he or she wants to accomplish. Is that single ruler using his or her great power to serve the people over which he or she rules? Or is the ruler using that power to serve his or her own selfish desires? Aristotle recognized these possibilities and provided us with labels to describe them. Rule by a single person who seeks to serve the needs of the community was called Monarchia by Aristotle. That word has evolved into the term monarchy that we use today. Aristotle's monarch is a good king. He uses his power for the benefit of the people in his kingdom. A single ruler who seeks to serve just his own desires was called tyrannus by Aristotle. That word has evolved into the term tyranny that we use today. Aristotle's tyrant is a bad king who uses his power for his own selfish benefit, not for the good of the people of his kingdom. Of course, just about any single ruler will want to be thought of as helping his or her people. So if a label must be applied, such as in the case of a king or queen, they will prefer being called a monarch, and the media will generally oblige their preference. No ruler will wish to be called a tyrant, regardless of how accurate the label may be. That completes this lesson. Now let's review what we have learned. Which of the following are examples of Aristotle's different forms of government? A parliament and a congress, or a prime minister and a president, or a king, a council, and a public meeting, or an assembly and a division? A king, a council, and a public meeting are the proper set of examples, representing rule of one, rule of the few, and rule of the many. What are Aristotle's purposes of government? Are they freedom or control? Or are they peace or war? Or are they self-interest or public interest? Or are they compromise, consent, or conflict? Aristotle's purposes of government see the rulers as either serving their own selfish desires or the selfless needs of the public. What is a positive feature of the rule of one? Is it very efficient? Or does it generate lots of ideas? Or does it favor open debate? Or does it have particular respect for public opinion? A positive feature of the rule of one is that it is efficient. What is a negative feature of the rule of one? Is it public ignorance? Or is it competing interests? Or does it lead to arbitrary laws? Or does it make the decision-making process more difficult? A negative feature of the rule of one is that it can produce arbitrary laws. What kind of ruler was Aristotle's monarch? Was any king a monarch for Aristotle? Or just a self-serving king? Or was a monarch a public-serving king? Or only an elected king? In Aristotle's classification system, a monarch is a public-serving king. What kind of ruler was Aristotle's tyrant? Was any king a tyrant for Aristotle? Or just a self-serving king? Or was a tyrant a public-serving king? Or only an elected king? In Aristotle's classification system, a tyrant is a self-serving king. That completes this lesson. The next lesson will also be from Unit 1. It'll be Lesson 7 about the rule of a few.